My name is Lauren, and there is one afternoon I still think about whenever someone tells me that a single moment can't change your life, because I know better. Sometimes it only takes a few seconds. A door opening, a surprise look, and one secret you desperately wish you could take back. At the time, I was 41 and married to Mark. We had been together for almost 15 years. But somewhere along the way, our marriage had become more like a routine than a relationship. Mark wasn't a cruel man. That almost made things harder. He worked constantly. He paid the bills. He remembered birthdays. He did everything a responsible husband was supposed to do. But emotionally, he was somewhere else. We could spend an entire evening in the same room without having a real conversation. I had stopped complaining because complaining didn't seem to change anything. Then, one summer weekend, my friend Daniel came to stay at our house while he was between apartments. Daniel was 28, completely independent, and someone I'd known for several years through mutual friends. There was nothing romantic between us. At least, there wasn't supposed to be. The first day passed normally. We ordered pizza, watched a movie, and talked about work. Daniel was easygoing and surprisingly observant. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You seem distracted." I laughed. "That's just married life." He smiled. "That doesn't sound very convincing." I changed the subject. The next afternoon, Mark left for several hours to deal with work. Daniel went out shortly afterward. For the first time that weekend, I had the house completely to myself. I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and decided to take some private time for myself. I thought I was alone. I was wrong. I heard the bedroom door open. I froze. Daniel stood in the doorway. For a moment, neither of us moved. His expression immediately changed. "Oh my God! Lauren, I'm sorry." He stepped backward and pulled the door nearly shut. I was completely humiliated. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I thought you were downstairs." His voice disappeared behind the door. I sat there, wishing the floor would open beneath me. A few seconds later, I heard his footsteps disappear down the hallway. I didn't leave my room for nearly half an hour. When I finally went downstairs, Daniel was sitting on the sofa staring at his phone. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, I whispered, "About earlier? You don't have to explain." "I know, but..." "Lauren, seriously, it was an accident." I nodded. "Okay." And I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Something had changed. Not because of what Daniel had seen. Because afterward, I became painfully aware of him. Every conversation felt different. Every glance seemed to last a second too long. That evening, he made dinner. When he handed me a plate, our fingers touched. Normally, I wouldn't have noticed. This time I did. Daniel looked away immediately. "I think we should forget about what happened." I nodded. "Absolutely." But neither of us sounded convinced. The next morning, Daniel asked me something that caught me off guard. "Are you happy?" I looked at him. "Why would you ask that?" "Because yesterday made me realize something." "What?" "You seem lonely." I didn't answer, because he was right, and I hated that he could see it. Mark had stopped noticing things about me years ago. He didn't notice when I changed my hair. He didn't notice when I was upset. He didn't notice when I stopped trying. Daniel had known me for only a short time, yet somehow he'd noticed. That was dangerous. Not because I wanted an affair, but because being noticed felt good. A few days later, Daniel moved into his new apartment. I thought the distance would make everything easier. Instead, I started thinking about him more. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" I stared at the message. "Me what?" His response appeared almost immediately. "Daniel, are you okay?" I smiled sadly. "Me, why wouldn't I be?" He took a minute before answering. "Daniel, because you weren't yourself that weekend." I put the phone down, then picked it up again. "Me, I'm fine," he replied. "Daniel, I don't think you are." I didn't respond. But the next morning, I finally admitted something to myself. I wasn't thinking about Daniel because I was in love with him. I was thinking about him because he had reminded me of a version of myself I'd forgotten. A woman who wanted attention. A woman who wanted affection. a woman who wanted to feel attractive. And that realization forced me to look at my marriage differently. That evening, I confronted Mark. "Do you still love me?" He looked genuinely surprised. "Of course I do." "Then when was the last time you actually looked at me?" He didn't answer. I continued. "I don't want to be your roommate." Mark became quiet. For the first time in years, we talked honestly. Not about bills. Not about schedules. Not about work. About us. I told him I had felt invisible. I told him I had started finding attention elsewhere. And I told him that scared me. Mark asked, "Did something happen with someone?" I took a breath. Something almost happened. That was the truth. Nothing physical had happened between Daniel and me, but emotionally, I had already reached a dangerous place. Mark was hurt. So was I. But for once, neither of us walked away from the conversation. Over the following months, we tried to rebuild what had been neglected. It wasn't romantic or easy. There were arguments. There were uncomfortable silences. There were moments when I wondered whether we'd waited too long. But we kept talking. And eventually I understood something. The embarrassing moment with Daniel wasn't really the story. It was only the moment that exposed everything I had been hiding from myself. I had been lonely. I had been frustrated. I had been craving attention. And instead of admitting that, I had convinced myself that everything was fine. Daniel had simply walked to the wrong door at the right time. He didn't destroy my marriage. He showed me that my marriage was already in trouble. And strangely enough, that humiliating afternoon may have saved it. Because sometimes the most uncomfortable moments are the ones that force us to stop pretending. I still cringe when I remember that door opening. But I no longer see it as the worst moment of my life. I still cringe when I remember that door opening. But I no longer see it as the worst moment of my life. I see it as the moment I finally realized I needed to change something. If this story made you think about what you would do in Lauren's situation, tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about marriage, temptation, secrets, and difficult choices, subscribe for more.